Welcome back to the Multiracial Ministry podcast.
Yes.
And we are in season 1.
Yes.
Our first episode of season 1 on our first value for a multiracial ministry mindset. And that value is
Overthrowing fear.
overthrowing fear.
Overthrowing fear.
Why overthrowing
Overthrowing.
instead of overcoming?
Because a fearless community can change the world.
That's right. That's right.
And we are more than overcomers.
We're overthrowers. I like that. Yeah. We didn't even rehearse that before. That's great. Fear is something that is often more than a mountain in our life. It's more like a ruler
Yeah.
in our life.
Yeah.
Right? It like directs our actions.
Oh, yeah.
And this first episode, we're talking about how a fearless community can change the world. We really believe that.
Mm-hmm.
Fear is the enemy of peace.
Mm-hmm.
Where fear reigns, hatred, turmoil, and judgment rule both in our inner lives and in our communities. That's why to do a multiracial ministry, we have to be committed to overthrowing the reign of fear that is dividing our world
Yeah.
and holding us all back from being everything that God created us to be.
Yeah. 1 John 4:18 tells us that there is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear.
Yeah.
So why is this important in a multiracial ministry?
Why is this important in multiracial ministry? Well, if you have ever been involved in multiracial ministry before, you'll know that there is a whole lot of fear.
Yeah. In fact, I'm fearful of people who enter into multiracial ministry who are not fearful.
Yeah, there's something about just being honest,
Right.
You know, that there is a lot of fear, and we talked about this in the first episode of the podcast about multiracial versus multi-ethnic or multicultural.
Yep.
That fear is really at the root of race itself.
Yeah.
Because this desire for power over other people, I think really stems from this fear of scarcity, this fear that there is not enough for all of us.
So say more about that.
Well, I mean, if we look at the roots of racism historically, there are economic advantages to the people who created that system.
Exactly.
Right? There and a serious economic and many, many more types of disadvantages to people who did not create it, who are on the underside of it. And I think that if you look at the history of race itself, what you discover is that there is this sense, this clear sense that is true or that is understood to be true without even thinking. It's just like a basic belief that we have in a world like ours, in this market economy, that if I need more, then you have to have less. That there's a certain amount of stuff in the world. There's a certain amount of food in the world. There's a certain amount of water in the world. There's a certain amount of money in the world. There's a certain amount of platinum in the world. There's whatever resource that you might, and if I need more, then you must have less.
Yeah.
And so this fear of scarcity drives a desire for power over others so that I can have whatever it is that I want, whatever it is that I feel that I need. And I'm not going to be encumbered in that pursuit by the likes of you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, well, I know fear probably is the leading cause of racism in that way that you just explained. And, we've been divided for so long, we barely even know each other.
That's right.
And that's because racism has driven a wedge between us.
That's right. So you're talking about, if I'm hearing you right, there's this vicious cycle where that fear kicks off.
Yeah.
this system of race and racism, but then it also separates us. And,
definitely.
and because it separates us, it creates even more fear. Because what do we fear more than anything else?
What we don't know.
What we don't know.
Or better yet, who we don't know.
Yeah, that's right.
Who we don't know.
That's right. That's right. Yep. I mean, how many times has a person that looks like me walked down the street and moved to the other side of a street when someone who looks like you walked down it?
Right.
I would never move to this other side of the street when you're walking down the street because I know you.
Right.
Because I know you. But if I didn't know you, would there be something in my gut that's been formed by racism in our country, in this world, that would tell me to move?
Yeah.
I'd have to resist that.
Yeah. And we're in Oakland, California, right?
Yeah.
Everybody knows the story of Barbecue Becky.
Oh boy, we're going there, right?
Yeah,
okay.
we're going there. We're going there.
Okay, leaning in.
Everybody knows the story of Barbecue Becky. Do you think it was fear that caused her to make that call to the police?
At least in part, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know her heart, but absolutely. But I mean, if I was to guess, I would guess that'd be the predominant thing. Fear covered up
Yep.
by all of these secondary feelings or all of these other ways of sort of making herself feel powerful, right? Because maybe she felt, now wrongly, vulnerable,
Yeah.
right? And there is a way in which we can feel vulnerable in the world for good reason, but there's, I think, as we both know, way more opportunities for us to feel vulnerable when we're not actually even vulnerable.
Yeah.
And in a multiracial ministry, those feelings come up all of the time.
Oh, yeah.
All of the time.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, even think about something as, since you brought up Barbecue Becky,
Yeah.
I have to bring up, oh my goodness, I'm blanking right now. College admissions. College admissions have been in the news in the last year. You know, and whether or not somebody is given affirmative action because of their racial background.
Right.
What is feared on the one hand is that there won't be enough spots for people like me.
Right.
If people like you are given an unfair advantage, quote unquote unfair. And this is not me talking.
I was just going to say, is it really unfair?
It's not. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying. I'm just, I'm just putting out there what is in the zeitgeist.
Right.
But then there's also a fear on the other hand that if there isn't affirmative action,
right,
then there won't be spots
right
for people like you who are very often the victims of implicit bias in admissions. Quite apart from all the historical inequities that make it more difficult for people of color to rack up the kind of scholastic and extracurricular accolades that white students can because of historical inequities. So there's fear on both sides from both directions, and the only way forward is if we are not being ruled and reigned by fear and its minions.
Yep.
So fear generates racism, you said earlier. How have you personally experienced that, if I could be so bold to ask?
You are being bold to ask. Well, you know, most people don't know, but you know that I am the regional president for my Converge district.
Converge is
we're formerly the Baptist General Conference, but now we consider ourselves a movement of like-minded churches. Other people might consider us a denomination, but we don't consider ourselves a denomination. We consider ourselves a movement of like-minded churches, which has 10 regions across the U.S.
Okay.
But I was recommended by the previous regional president for the position. And man, I went through a series of 6 or 7 interviews. And what made that time, what specific to your question, is before I interviewed, we were at a pastors conference, and you know me, I had on a Black Lives Matter T-shirt, and this was during COVID, and I forget those masks, that the kind that that's like a sleeve that goes over.
Oh, like a balaclava?
Could be.
Okay.
But I had one of those on, and it said Black Lives Matter.
Oh, yeah.
And I was probably only one of 5, 6 black people that were there.
Man.
But no one asked me why was I wearing it. No one asked me my thoughts on it. No one asked me nothing about it. They just went on business as usual. But I heard during the interview process,
the interview for the regional president position.
Right. Yeah. That some people were fearful of naming me or electing me or voting on me to be the regional president because I wore that Black Lives Matter stuff, and I might promote Marxist concepts.
Wow.
Yeah, and I don't...
Because you just said something that the gospel deeply affirms.
Deeply affirms.
That the lives of black people matter.
Yeah, and I don't even know what Marxist concepts are. Yeah, so... but I think it was the fear, not of me being Marxist, but the fear of my blackness, and
that people didn't even come up to you to ask.
Didn't even ask. No, but it came up later.
Man.
And man, needless to say, man, I don't have anything to offer people other than my authentic black self.
Yeah.
That's all I have to offer. And if you can't accept that, then I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I stopped trying to fit in a long time ago.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
I know that. Man, when I first met you, you were wearing a mohawk, I believe, at the time.
Yeah.
And I didn't know any other pastors ever that were sporting a mohawk. So I know you stopped trying to fit in. I mean, I'll say from my side, I remember the very first year over a decade ago that I moved to Oakland, and I was living in this neighborhood, and I would walk down my street to go to a coffee shop, to go to BART, whatever, take the train somewhere. And there was this guy, a black man, who was wearing a tank top, who was hanging out in front of his house, always with some other guy. There's a different guy every time, next to his like kind of broken down van with tricked out rims, in the middle of the day, always there in the middle of the day. And I had this immediate and visceral, like I didn't plan it, I didn't want it, but I had this immediate thought that came from a fear in my mind. I should just move to the other side of the street. I should just, I'm going that way. I'm going to go that way eventually. I'm going to make a right turn. I should just go to the right side of the street now. Let's now or later, might as well go now.
Yep.
Rationalizing it in my mind, right? And I remember going back to my seminary later on that year after I had processed a lot of this, and just checking in with different professors and whatnot. And I'm talking to my philosophy professor, and I'm sharing with him this experience, and he's trying to make me feel better about it. Okay, he says, well, Kyle, okay, you shouldn't feel bad about that, because that you are just logically extrapolating from statistics, right? I mean, this is his argument, right? That if most of the, say, robberies on the street are perpetrated by young black men in your city, then if you're trying to stay safe, then the logical conclusion you should reach is that you should avoid being alone on a street corner with a young black man that you don't know. And I sat with that for a second and I thought, you know what? That is what I've been doing, if I'm honest. And it is logical. If my main goal is self-preservation and not love.
Wow.
If my main goal is preserve myself at all costs, then I will avoid any person who statistically could theoretically be a threat to me in any sort of way. Now, of course, you can't always do that, but I said to him, after I thought about it for a second, I said, you know what? What if my main goal was love? And would that cause me to look to different statistics to extrapolate from? Like, for example, the statistic that says the vast, vast, vast majority of young black men don't rob people.
Yeah.
Never have robbed anybody.
Right.
Maybe it would be logical then to assume that the chances are really good that this guy's not going to rob me. I started walking down the left side of the street and I got to know Carl. And he's a cool guy. He likes fishing. We bonded over fishing, you know, and I got to hear a little bit about his life and we, you know, we were good neighbors after that.
And that happened as a result of you replacing that fear you had with love.
That's right. There is no fear in love.
Yeah.
That's what the Bible says, and it turns out it's true. Go figure.
Yeah. I want to ask you something.
Okay.
Yeah. I see you bracing yourself. Okay.
I'm like, this isn't in the notes. So.
Yeah, it's not the notes. It's not the notes.
Okay.
Years ago, we were in Ferguson, Missouri, and they took us to this play, and we formed a demonstration at that play. You remember the night? And I remember us walking through the crowd in the seated crowd, and we were demonstrating. And I remember you saying that you had some fear. Yeah. I remember you saying you had some fear. You talked to me about this, but you said, and you was fearful of what the other white people were thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk about that.
Well, it was something that I had never been aware of before inside myself. It's not to say I didn't feel it before, but I didn't think I knew it was there until we were at that demonstration. You know, to set the stage a little bit more, that audience was, you know, probably 6,000-7,000 people.
Yep.
In St. Louis, and it was a play that was frankly like a deeply racist play. Yeah. Deeply problematic. Yep. Not just racist in terms of the storyline, but then also in terms of the casting and who was put where in the storyline, and folks were soaking it up. So anyway, we're demonstrating at this play on the anniversary of Mike Brown's death. And I remember looking in people's eyes that were looking at me, and I honestly can't remember if it was just their looks or if it was their words that said traitor. Traitor. Like, how could you throw in your lot with them? And like I said, I don't know if that was just in their looks or it was in their words or if it was just part of my own psyche that was telling me that I'm a traitor. Yeah. Because when you grow up white in America, and I think that this is fair to say for most people who don't grow up in like a deeply, deeply intentionally racist family or area, that you don't tend to think of white people as like my people.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we're not a collectivistic group.
Yeah.
We need people, but we don't think of ourselves as a collective. And that's part of how race functions, right? We could talk more about that later. But anyway, it was shocking to me because all of a sudden I was thinking that way. It was like, oh, wow, I think these people see me as a traitor to our people. I didn't know we had a people.
Yeah.
I didn't know we had a people, but there was this fear of betraying people. And then, of course, that means maybe potentially fear that many people that I love would feel betrayed by me. Now, I don't see it as a betrayal. I actually see it as freeing.
Yeah.
To me and to white brothers and sisters and family members, to actively oppose racial injustice. But it felt like that at the time.
Yeah.
And there was an inner fear that I had to deal with that had nothing to do with other people. It had everything to do with my own place in the world and who I am.
Yeah. 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 I remember that. I just wanted you to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, that's bringing me back.
Yeah. And the only part of that night that was scary or fearful for me is when the police showed up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. And there were things that were fearful that happened.
Yep.
So this season, we're going to be talking about overthrowing fear.
Yep.
Many of the practices that we explore in this season are practices that we believe that, and I mean, not just we believe, we've actually experienced that when we engage these practices over time, they do overthrow fear in our lives and in our communities.
Yeah.
Those practices include things like
leaning into healthy conflict, creating equitable systems and structures, being willing to fail.
Yes.
This is a tough one. Apologizing quickly and fully.
Yes, and fully. Oh, man, that's going to be a hard pill to swallow for some of us.
Becoming lifelong learners of the other.
Yeah.
This is a good one. Following the Holy Spirit's lead. And all of these help us to overthrow fear in our communities.
Yeah, that's right. So if you are wondering to yourself, okay, they started out with this idea, the title of the podcast, A Fearless Community Can Change the World. How do you back that claim up? Well, all I have to say is all those things that Bernard just said, imagine the whole world doing those things.
Right.
Imagine a whole world that was living as if fear didn't rule.
Yes.
Imagine a whole world engaging healthy conflict and instead of playing politics or being passive aggressive. Yeah. Imagine a whole world that had intentionally created equitable systems and structures. Imagine a whole world that was able to apologize quickly
and fully.
Not, I'm so sorry you feel that way.
Right.
Right? I mean, imagine how the world would be different. That is why we are very confident that a fearless community can change the world, because when you live into this fearless reality, when you do the practices that come along with being fearless, the world looks like a totally different place.
Yeah.
And a multiracial ministry is actually possible.
Yeah. So we want to give some biblical examples. What's the first biblical example that comes to your mind?
I mean, I think the first biblical reason that we can say overthrowing fear is deeply important is because the Bible says, do not fear.
Over.
And over.
And over.
And over again.
And over again.
It is the most frequently repeated imperative in Scripture.
Yeah.
Do not fear.
Yeah.
A story that might come to mind is the story of Exodus.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Moses was fearful. God told him to go tell Pharaoh something. He's like, I can't speak well.
Yep.
Yeah, man. And I'm quite sure he said, I can't speak well because he was scared.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, and fear had driven him out of Egypt to begin with, right? Fear that it was going to be found out what he did when he murdered that Egyptian soldier.
Yep.
Right? And then it's all throughout the story of the Exodus, not just of Moses. People who are afraid of starving in the desert, complaining to Moses, maybe we should go back.
Yeah, or Moses is up there on the mountain too long. He's not coming back.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Aaron, make us a god.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then finally, sort of, in that story, I think that fear culminates in this quintessential biblical story of fear, where Caleb and Joshua and the spies go to Jericho.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
They go to Jericho
yes.
and they come back with their report and they say, man, these people are giants.
Giants. Let me ask you this. Do you think that the people were actually giants, or do you think there was something else going on at play? Did they really see giants?
I don't know if those people were 6 feet plus, or if the Israelites were particularly short, But I think it stands to reason that if you are a people who have been slaves for generations, then when you look at Jericho and you see these free folks that are standing tall, you might be afraid of the confidence with which they walk around in the world. You might be afraid of the economic prosperity they seem to have. Fear of even the fortress that was Jericho. It could make people look a whole lot bigger and scarier than they actually are. There's a practice that God gave his people in the desert that I think is a really interesting practice. Like, why this of all the things? He gave them manna when they were afraid of dying from starvation, right? But he didn't just give them manna and say, all right, here's your manna, take however much you want or need.
Only take enough, only collect enough for the day.
Only for the day. In other words, don't let your fear of scarcity drive you to hoard food for yourself or your family. Trust that I will provide for you again tomorrow, because God does not operate in a world of scarcity. He just doesn't. God has enough.
He has enough.
He has enough. So he is forming his people Israel over 40 years with this practice of faith over fear. So we have to wrap this up, but I think we would be remiss not to talk about what the gospel has to say, what the good news about Jesus has to say, specifically about overthrowing fear. So what does the gospel have to say about this?
God has shown his perfect love to us by sending his own son for us and dying for us, and by raising him from the dead, so that even in death, that most fearsome enemy would not strike fear in us anymore.
That's right.
And if we don't have to be afraid of death, we don't have to be afraid of anything.
That's
Jesus conquered death.
That's
so
right.
We don't have to be afraid of anything.
Man, and if we don't have to be afraid of anything, that certainly means we don't have to be afraid of each other.
Exactly.
We don't have to be afraid of people from different racial backgrounds.
It starts with us not being afraid of each other.
We don't have to be afraid that there aren't going to be enough spaces in college for us. We don't have to be afraid that there's not going to be enough food on the table. There's not going to be enough economic resources for all of us. If we're not afraid of death, what do we have to be afraid of? It reminds me actually of when we were in Ferguson, and there was one particular organizer who was as part of the protests after Mike Brown's death, and he remembered standing in front of a tank, and saying, "I'm no longer afraid to die. So what can you do to me?
What can you do?
What can you do to me?" I was so inspired by that, and it reminded me of N.T. Wright, the theologian N.T. Wright, biblical scholar N.T. Wright, who said, "Why do you think Caesar was so afraid of this ragtag little band of Christians, these followers of Jesus? It's because they believed in the resurrection." Because they believed in the resurrection, and when you believe that death is not the end,
man, listen,
the Colosseum sucks,
right?
But
what could you do?
But what can you do to me?
What could you do?
What can you do to me? So that's why we believe a fearless community can change the world, because there is no power, no might that can that can keep us from pursuing the love that God wants us to share, even at sacrifice to ourselves.
Yeah.
Jesus, sorry, I just had to say this. The last thing I'll say is that when Jesus came to die for us and provide the way to new life through the resurrection, he did not do it without fear. It's not that fear didn't have any impact on his life.
Yep.
If you remember the story, I mean, I know you remember the story, but if our listeners remember the story, Jesus sweat drops of blood.
Yeah.
He was so terrified of not just his death on the cross, but the experience of having the presence of the Father stripped away from him. He was so terrified of that, but what did he do? He overthrew it.
Yeah.
He overthrew it. He overthrew it. He said, not my will,
but thy will be done.
That's who we're following. That's why we believe in fearless community can change the world, because a fearless man changed the world forever.
Yes, he did.
So at the end of every episode, one of the things that we love to do is provide a resource for people, right? We want to provide a resource for listeners at home. If you want to dig deeper into these concepts, into these ideas, into these practices, we want you to be equipped with stuff that you need to continue on in this multiracial ministry mindset. So one of the resources, I'm like our resident nerd in this podcast.
You're the resident recommender.
I'm the resident recommender. So
it sounds better than nerd.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Yeah. Resident recommender. I receive it. So today I'm going to recommend this book called Jesus and the Disinherited.
Yeah.
Jesus and the Disinherited, written by Howard Thurman, who actually was a minister in San Francisco and right nearby us. He wrote this book, and there is a whole chapter in this book on fear, and the dynamics that fear creates in a world that has been shaped and structured by racial power dynamics.
Yeah.
It is a really powerful book, and a really eye-opening book, I think, for a lot of folks. It says things that they may have felt for a long time but didn't put words to, and for others, it might be a chance to get close to the pain that creates fear. But it's a really, really wonderful resource, and when you read it, I think that you won't be able to put it down without a sense of, if we could overthrow this, it'd change everything.
Yep. Well, if the people like listening to the podcast, if they're digging it, I said digging, that kind of tells you how old I am. Yeah. If you're feeling this podcast, subscribe, like it, share it.
Yeah.
You can go to multiracialministry.com.
Multiracialministry.com.
Yeah.
And you can subscribe there as well. Any podcast platform that you get this on, if you're watching on YouTube, you can subscribe there too. And you can share it with all your friends on the Facebook or the Gram, as the kids call it.
X.
And on, well, don't share it on X. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Share it on X if you want to share it on X. But we would love to continue on this journey with you. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you.